Nicole. Thank you, Nicole, for that introduction, and thank you all for coming tonight. Good evening. I want to start by saying that for me, it's not only a pleasure, but really an honor to be invited by the Conservancy to come and speak with you. I see the Conservancy very much like the kind of organizations I deal with in academia. You're evidence-driven, you're science-driven, and you drive that evidence and science to policy. That's what an organization like the Conservancy should be doing to protect your environment and to protect your health. So I think it's a great responsibility for me to fulfill an obligation they've given me to help to continue the education process that you already heard for the two previous speakers. Nicole just did a wonderful job of introducing a lot of the background for what I'm going to be talking about. So, title, Unconventional Oil and Gas Extraction, and with it the associated impacts on air, water, and health. I'm going to have to define some of those terms like unconventional, and I will. You got a glimpse of what that means from what Nicole just told you. But before we get into the technical stuff, I'd like to begin a talk. By the way, the last time I saw a crowd like this was at the last class I taught at Cornell, and those students were required to attend. So there's no exam at the end. You all get A+ and honorary PhDs from Cornell. Thank you for coming. Okay, so levity. There's an organization called Energy in Depth. Anybody ever hear of it? It's a fake, quote, scientific education organization put together by about a few dozen of the bottom-dwelling mom-and-pop oil and gas shops around the country. I'll let you read it. You realize that you're attending a thing tonight being presented by an... Wow. Yeah, whatever. Anybody here from Energy in Depth? They literally have been following me around for 7 years all across the country. So I'm surprised there's nobody here because they went to the time and the effort and the money to broadcast through their blog site the fact that we're meeting here tonight. And they will report on it, and of course they will twist and distort and lie about everything we talk about tonight. But I feel good about it because they're wasting their time and money on efforts like that. Fine, go for it. But here's what we're going to do. I'm going to begin with a brief history of oil and gas development in Florida. Nicole already told you that Florida has never been a big oil or gas producer. I'll give you a little bit more facts and figures, and you'll see how things have evolved and come to the same conclusion that C already told you should come to. Why in the hell come to Florida to produce oil? Then we're going to do a series of vignettes on what do we know now that we did not know in 2008 when the so-called energy dominance boom began. Back about then, big fracking, big unconventional development of oil and gas really took off in many places across the country. Before we knew very much about the science. States across the country, legislators across the country, regulatory bodies across the country opened the barn door and said, go for it, before they knew the downsides. So I'm going to recount some of the things we now know nearly a decade later that we didn't know then, and these are the things that your legislators should know now. There is no more excuse for ignorance. So we're going to talk about why the shale gas boom that really started this so-called energy dominance thing busted about 2 years ago and is still bust, which again questions, why in the hell come to Florida when oil is $50 a barrel and it's going to cost you $100 a barrel to get inferior oil out of the ground? You know the old saw about oil and gas development and gold mines and silver mines and lead mines? At the end, the only people who make money are the people who sell the shovels. Somewhere along the line, there's money to be made by somebody. And the question you have to answer is it worthwhile for all the people in southern Florida to bear the burdens and the consequences for a few people maybe making a little bit of money? A little bit on what our neighbors would now be getting, all the harms with very little benefits. That the shale gas and oil boom worsens not worsened, continues to worsen climate change. And you should be very, very aware of that in southern Florida. And that the peer-reviewed scientific literature, which did not exist in 2008, but now really does exist, is overwhelmingly proving scientifically that the impacts against water, air, environment, human health, and climate change are real, and they're real and present dangers. And finally, I'm going to make some suggestions about what you can do along the lines of what Nicole already told you to do. So here we go, brief history of oil production. Did you know that in the entire 80-year history of oil and gas production in Florida, there have been 4,100 wells, plus or minus, drilled in the entire state? Every one of those red dots is a well site. Notice that? This is the Sunnyland area that you heard about from Nicole. 4,100 wells sounds like a lot, right? There have been 4,100 shale gas wells drilled in Pennsylvania in the last 2 years. That's not very many. So it's not a matter of what's happened in the past, it's what is intended for the future. So here is a blow-up of our region of Florida. These are all the recorded wells. Now mind you, back in the 1940s, there wasn't too much accurate recording being done. You get my message here? Okay. So we're not really sure how many wells exist or ever existed, or where the ones that were drilled but never recorded still are as potential leak paths for future wells. That's a phenomenon that's occurring all over the country with so-called frack hits. You drill a new well, you frack the hell out of it with 10 million gallons of frack fluid, and a lot of it comes up to the surface a mile away through an old well you didn't know existed. You can't read this graph, so I'm going to tell you what it says. This is a history of all oil and gas production in the state of Florida. It reached a peak back in 1978, 4 million barrels of oil per month. There were about 500 wells producing that. Currently 150,000 barrels per month, so it's certainly, this is a log scale. From 4 million barrels a month to 150,000, there's still some money to be made by somebody. In October of this year, there were down to 60 producing oil and gas wells in the entire state of Florida, producing roughly 2 billion cubic feet of natural gas per month. That's not enough to light or heat a quarter of Naples. Very, very small amount of gas. 150,000 barrels per month. Ready for this? How much oil does the United States consume per day? Anybody know? 20 million barrels per day. Let me emphasize that. The United States currently consumes 20 million barrels of oil per day. And Florida is producing 150,000 barrels a month. That's about $13 million per month of fossil fuel gross income at current prices. Somebody is grossing $13 million a month. Now I point out gross because, as you know, or as you're about to find out, oil is now selling for about $50 a barrel. Gas is selling for about $2 a thousand cubic feet, and nobody, almost nobody, is making money selling gas or oil right now in the U.S., which is why we're trying to export it to people who will pay a lot more for it than we will. Where are these active wells right now? Oh, there's 2. And there's 3. Those 3 I pointed out to. My wife and I used to be snowbirds. We bought a garden home down here back in 1997, and we were part of the demand for increasing housing in southern Florida, and after almost 20 years we felt guilty about it, so we left. But while we were, I'm not suggesting you do that, because we like Ithaca, New York as a permanent home. We're crazy enough to love that cold weather. But one of the places that we always went to every time we were down here, sometimes more than once during the season, was Shark Valley. How many people here have not been to Shark Valley? You got to be kidding me. Okay, everybody who's been to Shark Valley, turn to the person next to you who has not been to Shark Valley and tell them they have to go to Shark Valley. Don't take it from me. There are no sharks in Shark Valley, don't worry. I'm not saying, but there are a lot of gators and a lot of birds and a lot of snakes. Okay, 17 miles away in the middle of eastern part of Collier County, almost in the Everglades, is where there is the most active exploration for oil going on. That required building roads. Okay, how much oil, bad oil, and gas, natural gas, is there available in the Sunnyland Formation of southern Florida? Ask the United States Geological Survey, which has a mandate from the Congress to report on all of the reserves, all the mineral reserves of the United States, including oil and gas. So in their 2015 report on Florida, they said that the potential, not guarantee, the potential is that there are 352 million barrels of oil in southern Florida. Now remember, 20 million barrels per day is what we consume. That's about 17 days of U.S. consumption. Is it worth it? Would Florida help make the United States energy secure and energy independent? Would Florida contribute to so-called energy dominance, or is this an afterthought, a sideshow for somebody's benefit? 1.6 trillion cubic feet of natural gas. The United States currently uses 30 trillion cubic feet per year, so that's about less than a month of U.S. consumption. And by the way, once you use it, it doesn't come back. It's not like what's down there regenerates every 5 years. It'll take another 500 million years to come back. So if an operator or operators or mineral rights owners were able to get all of that, that would be about $17 billion worth of oil and $3 billion worth of gas. So that's not small potatoes, but that's gross. And that's assuming you get all of it. Currently in the US, using unconventional means, roughly 10% of the natural gas that's gettable is got. Just because you drill a series of wells in the formation that has a lot of gas in it doesn't mean you're going to get all the gas. Currently about 2% of the oil that's down there is got. Pardon my bad English. So here's the most important thing I'm going to say tonight, so I want to emphasize it. As usual, a few folks will get rich selling the shovels. Everybody else will get negatively impacted. The state will get left holding the environmental bag, they always do. And finally, we'll kill the Everglades. That's what will happen. We'll figure out what to do about it in a few minutes. All right, what do we know now that we didn't know nearly a decade ago when this so-called surge to energy dominance using advanced well stimulation techniques? That's what the bills that we're going to talk about and you've already heard about. That's what the bills do not prohibit fracking. They prohibit the umbrella that Nicole showed. Fracking is one form of well stimulation. Acid fracking is another form of well stimulation. Matrix acidization is another form of well stimulation. These bills are written with intelligence. They're well researched. They said the entire shebang, put the umbrella over all of it. Okay. So, what's happened in the last 7 years? Greed. What was oil selling for in 2008? Think about what you were paying for gas in 2008, $4.60 a gallon. Oil was selling for $160 a barrel. Natural gas was selling for $14 a thousand cubic feet. Everybody got on the bandwagon. There were companies forming overnight in bars. Literally. 70 companies showed up in Pennsylvania in 6 months to drill for shale gas. 70. 60 of them had never been heard of before. Greed. They overproduced. Here we are back in 2008. That's natural gas. Whoa, sorry. Natural gas, $13 a thousand, almost 14. Now at $2.90 as of 3 days ago. Would you invest in something that did that? Okay, oil. Let's see, going back to 2000, say mid-2014, $105 a barrel. A couple days ago it was 54. Well, no. Long-term investment? How many companies have gone bankrupt since 2014? If you can't read this, I'll read it for you. This is the number of filings for bankruptcy among oil and gas companies in the U.S. July of this year. Why would they bother? I still don't understand. I'm going to ask that question again and again tonight. You should be asking yourself, what's going on in southern Florida? You can't make any money. The gas is minuscule. The oil is even less. The oil is bad. Fly-by-night companies are going to come and do it. What? Who's pushing this? Who's pushing this and why? What's in it for somebody that's causing all this ruckus? 250 people here tonight that could be home gardening. Out in the Gulf fishing, playing golf, whatever, but you're here tonight. Wow, I don't understand it. It's ludicrous. But there's some people in the legislature, just like people in New York and Pennsylvania and Ohio and Texas and New Mexico and Colorado and Louisiana and Kansas and Oklahoma, whatever. All right. 2008, we didn't really realize when all this advanced well stimulation technique was going to come to your backyard, what was going to happen to your backyard. Well, there's a backyard. There's homes right there. McMansions in central Pennsylvania, rural central Pennsylvania, sparsely populated, suddenly found things like this. What is that? It's a waste pit. You pump 10 million barrels of something down the well to stimulate it, either by matrix acidization or fracking or acid fracking. Millions of that stuff comes back up as waste. And as Nicole pointed out, it's not drinkable anymore. That's what it looks like. And until they can truck it away to some safe disposal site, they put it in ponds. Nicole mentioned that these wells, 24/7 operation, even in Pennsylvania and Ohio, in the middle of winter, 24/7, which means they're working all night, which means they have to light the pads. And associated with all oil wells is natural gas. And since you're only trying to get oil out of the wells in Florida, and you're not worried about the gas, it's not worth anything, and there's no pipelines, maybe. What do you do with the gas that comes up with the oil? You flare it off. How about lighting up the Everglades at night? That's what the people in Pennsylvania have to deal with. I live 40 miles from the Pennsylvania line, and on a dark, clear, moonless night, we can see glow on the horizon to the south of us. That's how bright these flares are. Series of videos, building pipelines. Notice that they've cleared the trees, killed the trees, piled the trees, and burned the trees. Definition of a tree. I think I should never see a poem as lovely as a tree. So trees are poems. A tree is a carbon capture and sequestration unit. So what they're doing here is killing carbon capture and sequestration units in order to build a pipeline to unsequester by burning fossil fuels to put the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere that the trees can no longer suck out and absorb. That's called burning your candle from both ends, or worse. Another set of videos, I'm going to show you activities that go along with oil and gas production, some of which would occur in Florida, some of which might not. But I just show you what other people in other states are having to deal with. Turn down the volume, will you? No. That's what it sounds like. That's a compressor station doing a blow-off. What's a compressor station? Compressor station compresses gas that's coming out of a well, if the gas is going to be captured, and compresses it to 1,000 pounds per square inch or more so it can go into a pipeline. Every once in a while they have to blow off extra pressure, or they might have an emergency shutdown, and that can go on for hours. By the way, that stuff, pure methane, directly into the atmosphere, unburned. That's not a pipe, that's not a compressor station, that's a pipeline. Every pipeline that's carrying natural gas is operating, as I said, if it's a transmission line, at 1,000 pounds per square inch or more, and whenever they have to do repairs on the pipeline, the average age of transmission pipelines in the United States is 55 years. Whenever they have to do repairs, what do they do with the gas that's in the pipeline? Blow it off. When they pig the pipelines, pig, P-I-G, not oink oink, pipeline investigation gadget. It's an electromechanical device that's sent down the pipeline that's checked for corrosion and cracks. Every time they put a pig in the pipeline, take a pig out, they got to blow off the gas that's in the pipeline. Again, raw methane into the atmosphere. No sound on this one. This is a video taken with a FLIR camera, forward-looking infrared, capable of seeing things that the human eye cannot see. That mist is methane. Can't see methane, can't smell it, can't taste it, unless you're using an infrared camera. This is from a well site. So while they're drilling for oil and gas, there's constant leaking or purposeful venting of methane directly into the atmosphere. And one last video for your edification. I took this one. Driving across the countryside in northern Pennsylvania a couple years ago, we saw that. So at that point in Pennsylvania, they were drilling more wells every day than they could possibly put online. There were no pipelines to take the gas. So you drill the well, you frack the well, you got gas coming up at 1,000 pounds per square inch. You can't overpressurize the well for too long. You run risk of busting valves and flanges. So every day you send out a guy in a white pickup truck, he turns the valve and decreases the pressure by letting off the gas. And all the people living in the neighborhood have to hear that for hours. Again, direct emission of methane unburned into the atmosphere. Unburned into the atmosphere. Methane unburned into the atmosphere. Which, other than moisture in the atmosphere, which is the most harmful greenhouse gas? I hear carbon dioxide. True. What's the next most? Methane. How close? How close are those? Can we ignore methane, just worry about carbon dioxide? No. Okay. You knew I was going to do a little bit about climate change tonight. I hope you don't mind. The latest and greatest paper from Jim Hansen, you've heard of him. He's the former NASA scientist who introduced the term climate change to the US Congress back in the late 1980s. Recently retired from NASA, but he continues to do research. This is his latest paper. Notice the title of the paper, Young People's Burden. He also wrote a book called Storms of My Grandchildren. Now, I'm not going to say anything about the average age in this room, but I have 4 of them, grandchildren that is, and I'm very concerned about the burden that our generation and previous generations is putting on our grandchildren and our children. So in his paper, this is about global warming. This is temperature anomaly, that is rise in global air and water temperature around the Earth. This is actual data starting from 1970 to 2017. Look where we are, 1.3 degrees centigrade. Remember that number. Sounds small, but you've heard these arguments about how a small number can have a big impact. 1.3 degrees centigrade global warming since 1970. Is that good or bad? Remember that 1.3 degrees centigrade. Now I'm going to show you 2 more slides that will hopefully bring home the fact that if Florida were to go about producing oil and gas, the gas gets emitted into the atmosphere because it's not going to get put in a pipeline and sent to market in Florida. The oil is going to get burned someplace and produce carbon dioxide. So Florida will be contributing carbon dioxide and methane to the atmosphere. This is a prediction made by the United States Energy Information Agency, part of the Department of Energy, currently headed by somebody, never mind. Here's history as of 2013. It takes them 3 years to catch up. This is where all the BTUs, British thermal units, that's a measure of energy, all the energy consumed by all sectors in the United States, heating your home, cooking your hamburgers, driving your car, generating electricity, commerce, industry, all the energy consumed in the United States, 30% of it in 2013 came from petroleum, 18% from coal, 8% from nuclear, 1% from liquid biofuels, 8% from renewables, 27% from natural gas, and our federal government under President Obama predicts that in 2040, that's going to be the picture. I want to make sure you got that. This is where we were in 2013, and this is where the federal government predicts we're going to be in 2040. What's wrong with that picture? It's business as usual. Look where they say renewables are going to be. Now, take a mental picture of that and remember 2040. And remember 1.7 degrees centigrade. This is where I'm going to ask all you advanced Cornell PhD students to really bear down with me here. This is nuanced, but it's really important nuance. Most of what you're seeing on this slide is from a paper that was published, trying to get the pointer, you can't see it. It was published in 2010 by a bunch of climate scientists from around the world. There are about 15 co-authors on this paper that appeared in the journal Science. So it's not garbage. It's not something somebody pulled out off the web by Googling it. It's a peer-reviewed publication in the journal Science. And when it was published, it was a graph that showed the best available data on global warming. Here's global warming in degrees centigrade. This is year. This is actual data, like this data I just showed you from Jim Hansen's paper. And then those scientists, using the best available software on the fastest available computers in dozens of laboratories around the world, all got together and predicted our climate future. That's what scientists and engineers try to do. You use the past to predict the future. But of course, 2020 hindsight, foresight, sometimes crystal ball gazing, so you can't be sure of your prediction. So every one of these solid curves, the purple, the red, the blue, and whatever that color is, have error bars. So this purple is the reference case, business as usual. Let me remind you about business as usual. This is business, that's business as usual, 2040, right? This curve says that according to the predictions made 7 years ago, business as usual would take us to 2 degrees centigrade by 2030. Those of us who are nearly octogenarians realize that 2030 is tomorrow. Years go by pretty quickly, don't they? Or, you know, since the computer models are not perfect, we might not get to 2 degrees centigrade until 2080. Somewhere in that range, somewhere between that dotted line and that dotted line, is where the predictions say we're going to be, if business as usual. If Paris Accords mean nothing. Now, since this paper was published 7 years ago, I've gone in every year and gotten the data from around the world and put those dots in there. This is now new data. Here's 2011, 2012, 2013, 14, 15, 16, 17. Oh God, I heard somebody say that. What do you see? The computer models were wrong, weren't they? In which direction were they wrong? They were low. Scientists like to be skeptical about their own work. They're always conservative. They don't want to be accused of crying wolf. So they conservatively said in 2010, if we do nothing more than we're already doing, we're going to get to the 1.5 degrees somewhere around 2022, 5 years from now. And it looks like we're going to get well, in a year or two, 1.5. And if that trend continues, You be the judge. So I just think these two slides are such wonderful, no, not wrong word, horrifying contrasts. Using all the economic indicators from around the world and from the business world, this is what our U.S. government under Obama predicted would be happening by 2040, and this is what science says is going to be happening by 2040. So once again, why would Florida want to make a situation that's already bad worse? For whose benefit? And just in case you're wondering whether what you hear on the radio, right-wing talk radio, about how the U.S. has done wonders, we lead the world in reducing greenhouse gas emissions. You've heard that, right? The U.S. has really, really gone to great lengths to reduce its greenhouse gas emissions. It's a bar chart, in case you're wondering. 1990, which is now used as the baseline whenever anybody says we've reduced our emissions since 1990. Here are the total emissions. We reduced since then, but we haven't reduced since 1990. This is gamesmanship. This is false advertising. When you hear somebody say, we really reduced our methane emissions, and you say, by how much and since when, you're asking for facts. If you just take at face value somebody saying, yeah, we really reduced our methane emissions and our carbon dioxide emissions and our other greenhouse gas emissions, we reduced them tremendously since 2008. Well, not really. But we haven't reduced them at all in 27 years. This is not my data. This is U.S. government data. You got to trust somebody. Okay. What else do we know now that we didn't know then? 2008. I already mentioned in 2008 when all the states opened their barn doors and said, come one, come all, frack the hell out of the country. Okay. The entire peer-reviewed literature on all possible impacts of energy dominance in the U.S. using advanced well stimulation techniques like the ones we're trying to ban in Florida, the entire literature consisted of 9 papers. 9. Three years ago, an organization I helped found is the word I'm looking for. It's called PSE, Physicians, Scientists, and Engineers for Healthy Energy. It's a not-for-profit whose purpose is to find and disseminate the best available vetted scientific information about everything having to do with energy, fossil fuels and renewables. Starting about 3 or 4 years ago, we decided to find all the literature and put it on a website. So this is an archive that you can go to. There it is. And here are the categories that we decided to take all those peer-reviewed publications into. I'll blow that up a little bit. No, I won't. I'll read it for you. What kind of impacts can we possibly have? Air quality, climate, community effects, ecology, economics, health, infrastructure, regulation, seismicity, waste fluids, water quality, and water usage. So all the literature that we find, every morning at 6 o'clock, we have a staff member who surveys the entire scientific literature. Not by hand. You have search engines that do that. Survey the entire scientific literature for the next paper that came out on any one of those topics having to do with oil and gas development. As of 2 days ago, there were now 1,292 peer-reviewed publications in that archive. In 2008, there were 9. What do we know then? Nothing. What do we know now? A lot. Who should know it? Legislators and regulators. Are the staff of the representatives and senators in Florida assiduously consuming all this literature? Should they be? Should you be telling them to? Hint, there's a record. I was wrong. I said 9. I meant 6. I keep confusing 2009 with 9. In 2009, there were 6 papers. That's called exponential growth. So science and engineering around the country has really gotten interested in this problem of advanced well stimulation techniques, as has the Conservancy. The Conservancy is a scientific organization. 60% of everything we know has been published in the last 2 years. No excuse for ignorance. What do those peer-reviewed publications say? Well, in which category? We have 12 different categories. I don't think there's a risk of seismicity in southern Florida, but there certainly is a risk of health impacts. So we survey the literature that came out in the last couple months on health impacts. You've probably been hearing a lot about that. It takes a long time to assess health impacts. How many people here are doctors? Come on, don't be afraid. How long do you have to study a potential health effect to have statistical evidence that the effect is real or unreal? Like cancer or skin ailments. Can you do that overnight? No, you have to have a longitudinal study. It takes years. Those studies began in 2010, 2011, 2012. They're just starting to get published. And what we found in the ones that have been published, 86% of them says it's real. There is an indication of potential or actual adverse health outcome if you're living in an oil or gas development zone. Of course, that's always been true. It's not just in the last 8 years that's been true. It's just that nobody studied it except for the last 8 years, which in itself is kind of weird, isn't it? U.S. has been producing oil and gas since the 1840s, and it's only in the last 7 or 8 years that science and medicine got around to asking very important questions. Are there adverse health outcomes if you're living in an industrialized zone in which advanced... Never mind. How about air quality? There is not a single paper that we found in the literature that says if you live in an industrial zone of oil and gas, your air is better than it was before they got there. Is that a surprise? 83% of them say, well, we have an indication of elevated emissions and or atmospheric concentrations.
That's not a surprise, but what's the alternative?
We'll get to that. We'll get to that. Water quality. 66% indication of potential positive association or actual incidence of contamination of water. Okay. People who are passing bills into law or forming regulations to control an industrial operation should know the science behind it. Okay, what am I suggesting you do? The gentleman here said, well, what are our options? First of all, we can vote based not just on our feelings, but on our knowledge. As Nicole pointed out, there are now 40 counties and 52 cities who have either banned fracking outright or passed resolutions opposing it. That involve voting at the local level. Florida. Florida. The entire state of New York, the entire state of Maryland, the entire state of Vermont, the entire province of New Brunswick, the entire province of Nova Scotia, the entire province of Ontario, the entire state, the entire country of France, the entire country of Scotland, the entire country of Ireland have all banned fracking. So, you shouldn't be worried that Florida will be an outlier. You'll be the only one. You won't be first, but you'll be counted.
Is Galway County one of them? Galway County?
No. Engage with your legislators. You've already heard Nicole say that. You had a lead-in where you're using your phones to engage with your legislators. You already started doing it tonight. The bills, SB 462, HB 237, I thought you should see the actual wording, the most important part of the wording in those bills. Advanced well stimulation treatments, ban. It's pretty clear. If you understand what an advanced well stimulation treatment is, an advanced well stimulation treatment means all stages of well intervention performed by injecting fluids into a rock formation. It can't get any simpler than that. That covers everything. Whatever you're putting down there, banned. Oh, God, this slide is messed up. As of May 2017, natural gas represents Florida's largest electric generation source at 69% of total generation. This is from a document that was created by FERC, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, in its ruling to allow a pipeline to be built in your state. They said you need the pipeline because you're going to be increasing. Oh, here we go. Point to the right thing, Tony. Florida is projected to retire 4,100 megawatts of power generation capacity, mostly from coal. That's good. A little bit from natural gas, some from fuel oil. But to replace that 4,100 with 5,500 megawatts of new generation, vast majority of which is natural gas. So you're going to replace your coal and oil generation for electricity with natural gas generation. When you burn natural gas, you get carbon dioxide. When you don't burn the natural gas and it leaks, you get methane. They're both greenhouse gases. Florida is heading in the wrong direction as a state. So what else you can do is support a much more rapid adoption of solar energy statewide. I was asked coming down here to say something about my experiences in New York. So this is the time to do it. You probably heard that New York banned fracking. Well, it didn't really ban fracking, it banned shale gas in 2014. But it was a long, hard fight, similar to the fight that you're going through right now. We had to wait for the right governor, the right legislature, and a groundswell of activists and advocates. It was a long, hard fight to say no to shale gas. But now New York State is the single largest consumer of shale gas of all the states in the country. We don't produce it, we import it from Pennsylvania. Did we win? We won words. We lost the war. So now we're trying another set of bills. One bill, reduce greenhouse gas emissions in the state by 80% by 2050. Make that a law. Another bill, replace all energy sources in the state that are currently fossil fuel with renewables by 2035. Make that a law. Think that's an easy fight? Okay, what can Florida do? Most states in the United States have an RPS, a Renewable Portfolio Standard, a set of regulations that require by law what this gentleman says can't be required by law. I'm sorry, but you're wrong.
You can write a law. The question is, can you achieve what the law says?
Well, yes, that's a good point. That one I agree with. And most of these states have not yet achieved their portfolio objectives in the time that they allotted to themselves. Because as you correctly pointed out, economics and politics resist change unless you're on the right side of the economics and the politics. Then you get the change that you want, which is usually no change because you're making money and you're in power. Florida does not have an RPS. Not a surprise. Notice which states don't have RPSs. You could pretty much map the last national election on top of that map. These are not coincidences, folks. That's a political map. So advocate that Florida should develop a set of policies in law that will move Florida more rapidly, given the exigencies of politics and economics, more rapidly towards where it has to go to save itself. Fewer fossil fuels, more renewable energy. I'm not saying overnight. It's impossible.
How did they get that passed in Texas?
Because Texas is currently the largest producer of renewable energy in the United States. Suck on that for a minute. Texas has more wind energy and solar energy combined than any other state in the country. And you know who did it? George Bush. While he was governor. He set that in motion. It's like the man says, money in politics. You get the right politician and you get the money coming in, all that open land with those winds blowing over the plains, all that sunshine, Texas. That's how they did it. All right, let's look internationally and then compare what's happening not only in the United States with no RPS in Florida. Let's look at what's happening around the world. And again, we're going to throw out some mistruths. The U.S. shouldn't be in the Paris Accord because it doesn't matter what the U.S. is doing, because China will drastically overcome any good that we do with the bad that they do. Top 10 countries in 2016 based on total photovoltaic installed capacity. This is solar energy. Who's number one? China. Top 10 countries based on added solar. In other words, what is the rate of change? Which country is moving fastest to more solar? Look at India. I thought India was a bad guy. Look at Germany. So China, Japan, Germany are the three biggest in solar. Germany? How many people here have been to Germany? Do you think of Florida-like skies when you're in Germany? Is Germany a place you go to the beach and get a suntan? You play golf in southern Germany? Well, some people do. Bavarian Alps are wonderful places for golf. Okay, I'm going to show you two maps. These are maps of solar incidence. You take 1 square meter of the surface of the Earth in Germany, or 1 square meter of the surface of the Earth in Florida, and you measure how much sunlight hits it in terms of energy. The worst solar incidence in Florida is better than the best solar incidence in Germany. So you probably heard people say solar doesn't work in northern latitudes. Solar can't work in New York. New York is the third largest producer of solar energy in the United States. New York. So if Germany can do it, okay, here's Florida. As of last year, Florida ranked 13th in the US in installed solar capacity. That's the total number of megawatts generated from solar in the state. You were 18th in the number of solar installations. There were a total of 3,000 in the whole state. California has 627,000. You got a ways to go, folks. I'm sorry, New York was 5th, not 3rd. Take that back. Can't remember all the numbers all the time. Finally, water. Again, we return to water. Nicole and Meredith were very good in pointing out a study that was recently published by that consortium of groups that looked at South Florida development scenarios in terms of water requirements. Color-coded. This is water in terms of gallons per day per acre. 0 to 245. 3,534 gallons per acre plus. So anywhere in that color bar chart. Here we are in Naples. So you're somewhere probably in this range, somewhere between 600 and 800 gallons per acre per day. And this study then projected forward and said, what happens when you get 15 million more residents in Florida? Southern Florida. Well, they predicted about a 100% increase in demand for fresh water. And as Nicole pointed out, you don't have 100% capacity to meet that demand. So you can hardly have something like oil and gas operations coming in and getting permitted for 280 million gallons per month of one-time consumptive use that doesn't return to the water cycle. You're competing with people's bathtubs. You're competing with kids in their showers at that point. And so even under a plus 50% demand, there's a lot more of the area of the state that's going to be requiring very, very large consumption. And unless climate change makes your aquifers better than they are, and saltwater intrusion reverses, So you have fresh water going into the ocean rather than salt water coming in? No, those would be miracles. So something has to give here. And then, of course, competing with that, this is presuming that climate change doesn't do something even worse to southern Florida. You've all seen this before. This is the latest scientific projection on sea level rise at 2 degrees centigrade global warming. Remember, we're at 1.5 now. And at the rate we're going, we'll be at 2. I'd like to say we will be at 2 degrees centigrade in all of our lifetimes. Everybody here is going to live at least another 10 years, right? Okay, if we get to 2 degrees centigrade 10 years from now, we won't be meeting here next time? Not without bathing suits and boats? Of course, this is just science. It could be wrong. These are all projections. There's error. It could be that it won't be that bad. But it's going to be bad in some places. So, another thing you can do is join the Solutions Project. It's a national organization. Its purpose is not to ban anything, it's to promote things. It's to promote the more rapid development of renewable energy to replace fossil fuels. The Solutions Project has online a plan for every state in the Union and 169 countries. If you want to see what Florida should be doing in terms of renewable energy, go to that website and you'll see a plan for Florida. It's a plan. It's not a law. It's not a regulation. It's a pipe dream. It's wishful thinking. But it's where you'd like to be sometime reasonably soon, like in the next 20 years. So, I hope I haven't frightened you too much. I hope I've educated you. I hope I've informed you about some misinformation you've been hearing. And I hope that you take to heart the suggestions that Nicole made and I've seconded. Follow the advocacy lead of the Conservancy of Southwest Florida. Everything they're doing is based on hard science and policy that is looking out for you as an advocate for your environment and for your human health. So thank you very much for your attention tonight.